Thank you for taking your time to be here today to hear this thought-provoking talk on What You Don't Know Can't Hurt You by Dr. Lucille Adams Campbell. If I read Dr. Campbell's bio, we'd be here all day, so I thought I would just kind of give you some quick highlights. Dr. Campbell earned her PhD in epidemiology from the University of Pittsburgh. She's currently the Associate Director of Minority and Health Disparities Research and Professor of Oncology at Georgetown University and Associate Dean of Community Health and Outreach at the Lombardi Comprehensive Cancer Center in Washington, D.C., and I thought I was busy. Her work in community health research, interventions, and outreach, specifically related to cancer, diet, and exercise, has been based on the simple goals of making complex issues understandable and improving people's lives. She has published over 200 peer-reviewed articles, served on the 2015 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, and was elected to the Institute of Medicine, considered one of the highest honors in medicine and health. Particularly important to us today, she has made a career of making students, especially women, students of color, and students who have not had access to major urban institutions of science and learning, aware of the opportunities and contributions that they can make to improve the health of all people. In the brief time she is with us today, I've asked her to paint a broad picture of issues in health and medicine, what we need to know that are only making the positive difference in our lives, but may be doing great injury to it. After her talk, Dr. Campbell will take questions, and then at 1:15, if you're interested, we'll have some informal conversation with her. So you have a chance to talk to her one-on-one or in small groups over in the Health and Wellness Department office area. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Lucille Adams Campbell.
Good afternoon, and I want to thank you for inviting me here. Sorry, we had about an inch of snow and I couldn't get here before because they shut down the airport, and my taxi couldn't get here, but I'm glad to be here today. Today I'm talking about what you don't know can hurt you, but I also want to talk to you about careers and trajectories and where you want to go and whether you want a job or a career. And those are very different things for different people. And then I'll go into what I am doing in my own work. Just to think about your career trajectory. I used to sit in your chairs. I was an undergraduate a long time ago, and I remember thinking I knew what I wanted to do and I would do it. Well, you'll see from my pathway, I called it my fickle career pathway. I went to a high school in Washington, D.C. where I was able to major in engineering. We had majors at that time. So I majored in engineering because I wanted to be an engineer. Then I decided to go to Drexel University, where I spent 4 years in a 5-year school. Think of it. You might think I'm a chemical engineer because I did 4 years of straight chemical engineering, but it was a 5-year school. I absolutely hated pipes and waters and things of that sort, but I got used to it because I was one of the spokespersons for Drexel University. 30 years ago, 35 years ago, you can imagine, I was one of the people that they always had to speak. But finally, I sort of revolted and said, I don't like this. And I changed. And change is not bad. Just keep in mind what you're doing today and what you'll graduate with, what degree you'll have. That's one thing, but that's not everything. You have to think about what you want to do. And when I was in chemical engineering at Drexel University, we had a co-op program, which was great. We went to school our first year and our 5th year, and years 2, 3, and 4, we did 6 months of school and 6 months of paid work. And I worked at the Naval Ship Research and Development Center in Annapolis, Maryland, as an engineer. So when I finished school, I had almost 2 years of training in chemical engineering. But I switched with only like 3 quarters to go, not even 3 semesters, 3 quarters to go, to biology. Because I wanted the more human touch, the human approach. And I thought biology could give that to me, whereas engineering, not really. And I ended up co-oping at Fox Chase Cancer Center. If you've heard about the hepatitis B virus, Dr. Baruch Blumberg won the Nobel Prize in 1976 when I was a student in one of his labs. So I told him I made him famous because my picture was in the Philadelphia Inquirer with his on the front page. And I was the only minority student working at Fox Chase at the time. I was the only student who had switched to biology there, and I had that experience. And those types of life-changing moments really give you impetus to go further and go do something different. I finished in biology, but I didn't like biology, nor did I know anything about biology. When you only do 3/4 in one field, you really don't know much about it. But I did well in those 3/4. But I decided to stay on and learn a little bit more about the biomedical sciences and receive my master's. And the biomedical science degree at that time was really a straight physiology degree. So I could say I knew about physiology, but I didn't know about biology. I still held to that. And this degree was in the engineering school still. It was in the biomedical science and engineering school, so all my electives still were mathematical. So you'll see that I finally decided to go and get a PhD in epidemiology. How many people in the room have an idea what epidemiology is? And it's not skin disease. Okay, I'll tell you in 1 minute just to make certain we're on the same page. And people ask me, why did I go to the University of Pittsburgh and why did I pick epidemiology? It was easy to pick epidemiology because I had the stimulus and the excitement from Dr. Blumberg winning the Nobel Prize and work with epidemiologists, so I sort of liked that. And you're always looking for a mentor, you're always looking for a role model, something to strive for. And he was the one that really lit a little light. It says, epidemiology might be good. You're very quantitative. Maybe you'll try it. Well, I got sick that summer. I was in the hospital for over 3 weeks with kidney trouble. So I withdrew from every school, but I forgot to withdraw from Pitt. I got accepted and they gave me a full scholarship. So I went to Pitt, very weak and probably less than 100 pounds, but I started there. And because of that little mistake of forgetting to withdraw from this school, I ended up getting my degree from Pitt. And then I did a postdoc training in behavioral epidemiology and chronic diseases. And at the time that I was a student, this really dates me, cancer was considered a rare disease. We know that cancer is no longer a rare disease. And methodologically, we treated it like a rare disease. So that's how I went through my career path, thinking I wanted to really be in engineering, never even knew what epidemiology was, and aspired to be an epidemiologist in the very end, just showing you that over, about 12 years more, you really can find your niche. So I was talking to the president of Georgetown University at a board meeting, and he was sitting beside me, and he says, you know what the average age before somebody has a career is now? It used to be 27. Now it's 31. And as a mother, I just gasped because I don't want to keep supporting my kids. But and I asked to explain why. And he said, because now the way society is, the way economy is, people have to work and take jobs to pay bills. And they keep changing jobs until they get to that job that really excites them and they think, this is the career path I really want to be on. And that makes a difference. I said, please let my kids do it before they're 31, because I'll be real broke by then. But that's the idea. And as you sit around here and you're thinking about what you're going to do, tomorrow, when you graduate in May, it might not be what you want to do ultimately, but you still need to keep thinking about it and moving that direction. Don't be stagnant. Don't just keep a job just to have a job, but think about what you want to do. You have a degree. You'll have a degree. And you'll have a degree from an accredited school. So you want to make certain that you keep your eyes on some prize. You don't know what the prize is yet, but you know that you want to always keep doing better. So here, I became an epidemiologist. And I just wrote the definition so you'd know. The study of the patterns, causes, and effects of health and disease conditions in defined populations. It's very different than studying water flowing and dynamics and thermodynamics and everything else, adiabatic systems in pipes and fluids. I can remember those because those are the things I hated the most, but I can still remember them. And when we think about epidemiology, people might not really understand it, but think about it this way. If I asked you to be a detective and find out what caused that disease, what was associated with that disease. For example, lung cancer, most of you could yell tobacco, and you'd be right for the most part. But how come everybody who smokes doesn't get lung cancer? Is there a subset of people that smoke that get lung cancer? So if you knew that you weren't the subset that would get lung cancer, does that mean you would smoke? So it's those types of things. We play detective work. But as epidemiologists, we have to work with so many people. Some people think of epidemiology as a field of its own. Some people think of it as a methods. And it's, I think, all of the above. But when you study epidemiology, if you can't work with other people, I think you could be in trouble. So it's very quantitative, but as you get older, you hire junior people that are more quantitative than you are, so you don't have to stay up on everything. That's my trick. And then I had to make some other decisions. I spent, from the time I graduated and started working, I did about 9 or 10 years in cardiovascular disease epidemiology. That was the hottest topic. I know even at UNC Chapel Hill, that was the hottest topic when we were in grad school. And cancer was a rare disease. So cancer epidemiology was not on the right in your face as it was for cardiovascular. So I did a lot of years in cardiovascular, but then I changed. But what didn't change, and you'll find out as I talk about my science, I didn't change my focus. It was always nutrition, exercise, obesity. That was always my research focus. And it was very nice that I could change from cardiovascular to cancer because the same risk factors play into these chronic diseases. I also decided when I was in school, and always, I wanted to focus on health disparities. But I wasn't interested in health disparities as you may know it in terms of access. We always talk about access. If everybody had equal access, they would have the same treatment. I can show you populations that have access and have subpar treatment. That's not on balance. I focus also on racial ethnic disparities. But I know where I'm located, Appalachian areas, rural urban disparities exist, geographic disparities exist, cultures. I was reviewing a grant 2 days ago, and I was really surprised to learn that a cutoff point that we would consider skinny, literally, is considered obese in the Asian community. That's also associated with high rates of diabetes at what we would consider skinny level. So the cultures, the different set points are really important. But the one part that I'm really interested in is the biological basis of health disparities. More specifically, the biological basis of cancer health disparities. And I say it that way because access is important. All of these items I've listed are important, but I'm interested in studying the biology. I am at Georgetown University Medical School. I do interface constantly with the clinicians, with the nurses, with the community, with the patients, with the patient advocates, with the navigators, and this group is really important. So the last item on this slide you see is, did I want to work in silos or did I want to do team science? Now, you can decide that you want to do one thing, but you need to know all these other things. And I could say that myself because I have done bench work. I've worked with animal models. I've worked with mice models until one bit me, and I was done with mice models. I've worked with human beings, and that's not even, the mice might be easier some days. And we work with populations. And I decided that the team is very important to me because I don't think I can answer the scientific questions by myself. We might have many ideas that we come up with, but unless we really can understand the dynamics and understand it from different perspectives, we won't have a solution. And when you think about any topic you pick, even if it's diabetes, I might ask you to form a group with 3 people who have 3 different disciplines and tell me how you would address the issue. And I guarantee you it would be very different than if I asked 3 people from the exact same discipline to get together. Because you don't get the beauty of interdisciplinary science or multidisciplinary science, where you have different disciplines talking about a question. Because a psychologist might view it from a very different perspective. A nutritionist may view it from another perspective. An exercise physiologist may think, just run. It might be just different answers, but I picked the team science approach. And I think it's much more successful. And if you stay in the sciences and you stay in research, you'll find out that even the National Institutes of Health almost poo-poos silo science. They've now written all their announcements around team science. Don't come in saying, I can do it, because they don't want that. They want to see your teams. One of the hot buzzwords now is translational research. It's like not just, you can do work at the bench and study breast cancer or cardiovascular diseases at the bench and be very good in the lab. But my question to you would be, what does it mean to the human being? If you're studying breast cancer in a mouse for the sake of the mouse, I think you have the wrong goal. It has to be for the sake of improving health. And so when we talk about translational research, we typically talk about in these days from the bench to the bedside to the community and back. And back is important because sometimes we find things in the community that we need to take back to the clinicians to make certain they understand that then may go back into the bench. And so this little paradigm that people are focusing on really is addressing this niche that we have to deal with nowadays. And that is the translation of our sciences beyond what we do individually or in our own field. And even more descriptive, basic to clinical to population. And a good example could be somebody could discover something in the lab. They can try it out in clinic settings. They call them phase 1 early phase clinical trials where they test it to see if there's something that could come out of it. And then you take it out to a larger population. But what's interesting about this translational research is it includes so many people. We've gone through life so much excluding people. If you're not a biologist, you're not in this club. If you're not this, you're not in that group. When you think about basic scientists, I think about the biochemists, the medicinal chemists, the biologists, sometimes the medical physicists, the whole array. You talk about clinicians, it can be the radiation oncologist from my perspective, or medical oncologists, the surgeons, but it makes certain that it's inclusive. If you talk about diabetes, it could be the endocrinologist. If it's aging, the geriatricians. So it really encompasses all of that. But the population science part, I think, is really important, even sitting here, because population science can be social workers, sociologists, psychologists, health communication specialists, any of those majors. And you fit into the translational research because you are definitely on this continuum. But people don't really understand and realize that. They might say, I'm getting a degree in this, but I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, I can tell you, if you really have a focus in the sciences, or you don't have to be the scientist. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make all of you PhD scientists, but keep in mind, there is probably a place for you in one of these little spots on this continuum that you can attain as a team science. You can be a team player, because like in my lab, in my office, I'm a population person, so I don't have a wet bench. I'm not going to ask you to do that, but I can send my samples out to a lab. I have, just so you get an example, I have an office that comprises exercise physiologists, nutritionists, health communications, community advocates, health educators, patient navigators, who am I missing? Nurse practitioners. So we can do all of our studies, but everybody is not the lead scientist, but they're the team players. We need people to actually run studies, to collect data, to do things of that sort. So this is the paradigm that we're in now, translational research. Everybody needs to think about it, not that you need to do all the components, but you should be able to realize that maybe there's a place for me somewhere, whether it's academic, whether it's community-based organization, because community-based organizations do these things, whether it's survivorship groups, you have different survivorship groups that need people to play a role. So just think about that model for a while. Now, I'm very interested in the sciences, and when we think about tumor biology, I know people are molecular biology majors and that sort, but how does it really play out? It's not just one thing, tumor biology. It's the dietary influences on the tumor, because I'm thinking about cancer. It's obesity, hormonal factors. And I think about exposures. Think about the Flint, Michigan issue with the water. What an environmental exposure. What is that going to do to people? It's going to cause some mental problems for kids, learning disabilities for kids. So just understand that so many components influence the biology that people have to endure. Stress, we had some discussions about stress already. We know stress affects tumor biology. Genetics, and you see epigenetics. And I don't want to get into a scientific discussion, but I can tell you the best way for me to describe epigenetics, because I always get asked little questions later. If I turn the lights off, have I done any damage to these structures up here, these lights? No. That's almost like thinking of these lights as DNA. When I turn the lights off, I haven't altered the DNA, but I cut it back on, it comes on. So certain things turn switches off and turn things on, but does not impact the DNA. So when I think about biology, and I told you I was interested in the biological basis of disparities, I can think about different aspects of it. So you might be somebody who's very interested in stress or very interested in genetics. There are roles for people. There are many roles. So make certain that you think of yourself in a broader net, cast a broader net so that you can actually think of how you play on teams. When people apply for jobs nowadays, they become very unidimensional. They really need to know where they're applying so they can understand the bigger picture and figure out how they fit in. If you can tell me why I need you, that might be a good reason to get a job. As you tell me, I know you have 10 people like me, then you're right, I don't need you. So you have to really think about your role. My interest went to energy balance, to obesity, but I just want you to look at this map. And the takeaway is, the top map is of obesity, the bottom map is of diabetes. As the screen gets darker, it means higher prevalence of obesity and diabetes below. What's very interesting about these slides is that it shows you clearly that 1994, 2000, you see very little dark colors. But as you get to 2008, everything becomes dark. Let me tell you, 2 decades ago, everything was blue when there was no obesity. Everything was blue or light blue. So our system, our times have changed. So we have the darkness now. But I'm going to go a little bit further. Now, as you'll see, the dark reds here show at the top for obesity, greater than 26% of the population being obese. So I'm going to show you a different scale. And you'll see that greater than 26% is the yellow. You see, we've now adjusted up more. This is 2011. It's still, think in mind, if you get darker, as it gets darker and darker and darker, it's still a greater percentage, higher prevalence. And the darkest colors on this chart are between 30 and 35%, but it will go to over 35% as I show you. And you'll realize that this is 2013. The maps are still being generated. And all it's showing is we're getting worse and worse and worse. Does it matter what people look like? Absolutely not. It is not about aesthetics. To me, it's about health. So this is what the map is now. And it shows clearly that Mississippi leads. And Mississippi has been leading for a long time. And what that really means to me is there's a higher mortality rate. There's a higher morbidity rate in almost every disease there. Now, it doesn't care what you look like, but it doesn't matter what it does to you. And I always keep that in mind. So don't care what people look like. So I really focused on energy balance. And this is your fat stores looking at energy intake, like a little scale. The more you eat, and less energy is expended through sports. Now, people who might not like this, and sometimes the little balance beam at the bottom, you can put genetics in there. I remember when I was very, very, very young, and even through college, I always laughed. My biostatistics teacher would tell me to this day, the chairman of the department, I would eat a pint of Haagen-Dazs ice cream for every biostatistic lecture. I needed it to get through this. But every class, I always had a pint of biostatistics, a pint of Haagen-Dazs ice cream and a gallon of biostat, I guess. And I always had that. But I also could eat whatever I wanted to. And we always took pride. We could eat whatever we wanted to. And then it stopped. And I was a huge runner. And that stopped. So things stopped, but the energy expenditure is important. But why is it so important? If you look at this, I also focus heavily on metabolic syndrome and breast cancer. And metabolic syndrome is obesity, hypertension, a little bit of hypercholesterolemia, your high lipids, your triglycerides can be off, your LDL can be off. And at least 3 of those factors comprise metabolic syndrome. Insulin resistance. So you have all these components. And if you look at this schema, you don't have to look at the details, but the calories you see at the top and physical inactivity lead to the obesity, but also like to the insulin resistance. And at the bottom, you'll see it ends up with breast cancer and endometrial cancer. And you just look at this and you think, wow, this is just a biological pathway showing what can happen. But when you think about it, what can I do? We always think about modifiable risk factors and non-modifiable. You can't change your age, you can't change your race, certain things you cannot change. But the things that you can change, some people will, some people won't. But I always think about it from this perspective, looking at biologically what happens. Not what you look like, just biologically what happens to you. And all of these pathways are impacted. They all are impacted, and it starts at the top. And I tend to prefer to focus on exercise more than nutrition. My nutritionist would like me to focus more on nutrition, so I thought that's her job, not mine, that's hers. But we know that we can't do it in isolation. They have to come together. Because I remember I could go out and run 8 or 10 miles, but I come back and eat to make up for all the miles I had run. But when you have when your metabolic rate, your metabolism is going faster and faster, you can consume more. But then when you stop doing that and you keep eating, you can't do it as well. Now think about evolution. This was from The Economist in 2003, but it's so nice and right. We've evolved for sure. And after my little ride downtown to see the fancy McDonald's you have here in Asheville, that I didn't get a chance to go in, but next time I'll get a chance to go in, you see we've evolved, and nice McDonald's cup, but it also comes with the obesity. I'm going to show you a series of pictures, but really to give you an idea of where we have evolved to. And sometimes people think, oh, the new things are better. And I can tell you, change is not always better. Sometimes, we might not want to be at the very beginning of this line, but we might not want to be at the end either. And that was during the hunter and gathering, let me go back. That was during the hunter and gathering period. And I think we've gathered enough McDonald's cups at the end. And we think about this, we've gone to a very sedentary population. And now the new science that's coming out, instead of physical activity alone, the focus has been on sedentary behavior. And being less sedentary doesn't mean being very physically active. It really doesn't. You could think about somebody who's very sedentary, but just moving from positions. There's science now on these new monitors out. Well, not new, but they're monitors called ActivePal. They're very expensive. I just bought some. I hope we do some work with it now that we spent all this money. But you you almost glue it to your thigh, and it measures that position change. And want to see if you're very sedentary for a very long time, what does it do to you? And that's really interesting because we always talk about people who are sedentary just being, less than 2,000 kilocalories per week or less than 10,000 steps per day. People don't walk 10,000 steps per day. We go to the mall, we drive right up to the front door and walk in. People do not do that. So here you see you've evolved, but we've also sat down more and we sit more. And we, in the Dietary Guidelines Committee that I was on, we actually studied and realized that this is really hurting children. Maybe not you, but children are really being hurt by this because we have video games now. So you can occupy a kid's time with video games the whole time, and I don't think their thumbs need to exercise, but they get a lot. One thing I can tell you about this city, you got very nice little restaurants. Not everybody wants to go to the restaurant, but in D.C., you drive down weapons of mass expansion all day long because they just exist there. But what you might not know is the evolution of the fast food industry, where you've come from 1 ounce burger and very few calories to this thick burger of 1,420 calories. And we always say supersize it. And nowadays you can go into places and you can have a large for the same price as a small. And I'll ask for a small, and they're yelling at me, but you get a large for free. So it's this mentality that we have to have more. More is always better. And, you can have the grapes or Doritos, which one do you think the person chooses? But another issue, especially for athletes, I should actually say for non-athletes, beverages and energy balance plays a really big role. There are a lot of drinks that are sports drinks that people have. They don't do sports, but they have the drinks. And it's a lot of calories, but it's also to get people reinvigorated. You finish running so much, you might have Gatorade, you finish doing this, but as you're sitting and cheering for people, and you have more Gatorade than the athletes have, it pours on your pounds. And people talk about it because it's easy to drink, fast, doesn't take any time. But when you think about it, there's an increase of soft drinks that are also associated with type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and more on cancer. Before, there was no link to obesity and cancer, but now there is. But the interesting thing, or the ironic thing, is that for premenopausal women, obesity seems to be very protective of breast cancer in particular. But for postmenopausal women, it puts people at higher or increased risk for breast cancer. So there's a lot to be done on this topic, and we're working on it. That's all I can say. And then if you think about the equivalents, and I'm just showing this because I don't think people really understand that a bottle of Sunkist is about, what, these are double Oreos, 5, 6 double Oreos, which I don't know if people eat it, but, and this, again, another comparison. And here, these are those drinks I'm talking about, and it's equivalent to like 6 donuts. And you really think about what you're consuming. And then you get scared. But there's so many links to obesity and diseases, whether it's cardiovascular disease or diabetes, but I picked cancer because that's what I study. And I focus mostly on breast. And colon, to me, is one of the beatable, treatable, preventable cancers because of colonoscopies. And the other ones aren't so much. But in the Native American population, gallbladder cancer is their leading cancer. And we know that they have a strong population, strong prevalence of obesity, a different type of obesity too, and starting very, very young as well. So that's my tie to what I do. But let me tell you a little bit scientifically, very briefly, about the locus of fat action on muscle. Just think of, here you have a little power plant. And I'm going to go through this really quickly. You have a power plant. I'm not going to, if y'all who've had biology, physiology, you can look at the mitochondria, you can do all that yourself. But just to show what do fats, what do they do? In the muscle, it reduces your capacity to make energy. In your brain, it modulates the circuits that underlie your feeding behaviors. And in the whole body, it causes inflammation. And we think about a power plant like in New York City, and you can also think about the entire place either being lit up or it going dark. And I just think fats play a major role in life. And you've heard about the types of fats there are, but let me just show you a simpler picture talking about the fats, the good fats and the bad fats. I'm going to start with the bad fat list because everything on the bad fat list I know I would rather eat than the good fat list. If you talk about ice cream, chocolate, or I don't know about deep fried foods, but go to the good fat list, the monounsaturated and polyunsaturated foods. People don't eat a lot of like the vegetables and seed oils and things of that sort. So even if you separate the good from the bad, no one's going to say stop doing all the bad things, but you have to think about moderation and reducing your intake and start on the bad side and trying to enhance it on the good side. But more importantly, saturated fats cut off genes. It can turn some genes off. It could be a regulating gene for X, Y, or Z. Just understand that biologically it does something. And that's not about aesthetics. That's just about what really happens functionally. And we also talk about the toxic environment. Foods are now available 24 hours. I do work in sub-Saharan Africa quite often, and I guarantee you some days I wish there was a 24-hour food place, a fast food place, and everything is done naturally and everything is cooked right there and all, which means I just go to bed hungry because you can't get anything. You look at the activity level. People live in urban areas, maybe not affected here so much, but in urban areas, people fear being outside. It's dangerous, high crime rates. I mean, you probably have better news than we have in DC or we here in New York, so crime plays a role in reducing our activity. And we do have a toxic environment where we have availability of bad things all day long, but the good things we can't even access. And in certain areas, you pay for it. You pay for this membership to be inside, to be safe, where it could be very nice outside, but you'd rather be inside and be safe. So that's what we call the toxic environment. And for those of you in this program, and especially know that physical activity recommends 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity per week to maintain health and fitness and prevent obesity. But we don't really know what it means to do 150 minutes. Some people say 30 minutes a day, and that's up for debate right now, even with the American College of Sports Medicine. Do you do 10 minutes at a time, maybe 3 times a day? Do you do 20 minutes at a time? Do you do a few minutes? I only do 20 minutes now. 20 minutes, I drive 5 minutes, do 20 minutes, and drive back 5 minutes. So that's my 30 minutes. Different math, but it works for me. But, but the idea is what makes you feel better, what really works for you, and that's a scientific question. Maybe that's a project you can do here. What's better? Do people have 30 minutes of time, or can they find 10 minutes to do something? Then later on find 10 more minutes, and maybe later on find 10 more minutes. And those are studies that are being conducted now to see what happens. This is not a clinical problem. What fits your busy schedule better, exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? And sometimes we have to scare people and tell people that, and it's in jest, but at the same time, it's about health. The last few slides I have to show are about a study that I have as part of the Center of Excellence on Health Disparities that's funded by the National Institutes of Health. And it's an exercise randomized controlled trial targeting African American women with metabolic syndrome, and they're at high risk for breast cancer. Now, the biggest problem is, can we do the study? It's a 5-year study. We're in year 4. We only have to randomize 240 women. That sounds easy. We proposed that we would have to screen almost 3,000 women to get 240 women. And we are at 2,100 screening. But we only need 20 more people, something like that. So we can do this study. We call it FIERCE. Focus Intervention on Exercise to Reduce Cancer. Now, the good thing about this study is it's never been done in populations exclusively of African American women. Many studies that are done in exercise and exercise intervention have a smattering of minority populations. So you really can't make conclusive statements about what's going to happen in that community. So we made a poster, a flyer, I thought was really great. Everybody looked great, they were made up, they were tiny and all that, and the community told me, you've lost your mind. That's not how you recruit. You have to show and recruit people that you want. And I guarantee you, the community has to be involved. This is where I think that the wellness program plays a good role, because we do so much community-based work to get these types of studies done. Yes, they come into our center, and I'll show you that in a minute, but more importantly, we have to engage the community. We have to do focus groups. We have to do formative interviews. We have to make certain the community is interested in these studies. We have to make certain that the community will utilize and participate in these studies. One of the biggest comments and questions that always comes up, how come we don't have people participating? Why don't low income, the poor, the underserved, the understudied, why don't they come to studies? They might not have access, but you might not have built a study or developed one that people are interested in or that they need. And so this is when, smoking cessation studies, people need them, some people are interested, and women told me, I didn't even know this was for tobacco, that I don't want to stop smoking because I'll gain weight. I didn't really realize that people use smoke, that's how far removed I am from tobacco, but how people use smoking to maintain their weight. So I'm trying to think of this. So you smoke to maintain your weight. You're afraid of gaining weight, but not of dying. That doesn't make sense to me, but that's how people really think. So you have to go with them. So they come up with a new program. So we did do a program called Quit and Fit. Stop smoking, substitute a good behavior for a bad behavior. And that was successful. So those types of things. So you work with the community, you get their input, and you understand what their fears are, what their concerns are, and you address them in your studies. So I still have to maintain my scientific rigor when I do my studies, but they can have a community-based focus, but at the same time, we address the community's issues, and we address the alarming health issues. So in this study, I won't show data because we're in our 4th year, and it's a randomized trial, but what we did, we created this randomized trial, and we have 3 different arms. Each arm has 80 people in it. when we're done. One is a supervised facility-based exercise intervention. They come in, they work out 3 days a week, and this study lasts for 6 months. Everybody's in the study for 6 months. We do home heart rate monitoring. We measure their VO2 max. They do the stress test in our office. They have to do all of that and collect the exercise diary and journal. And we ask them not to change diets. Now, this is unrealistic to me, but I was working with a very prominent exercise physiologist who says, we're only interested in what the exercise does. So my next study would not have no change in diet, because we know people need to change their diet too. But by us keeping diets constant, we're able to see the true influence of exercise. The home-based exercise, we're trying to get people up to 10,000 steps a day. And we give them weekly text messages, some goal motivators, so everybody has to have a phone. Interestingly, I don't care if you're poor, whatever, you have a phone. People have phones. And so we can send text messages. And some phone companies will give us free phones if we pay for a small type of service for research. So we can get phones to give to people who don't have phones. So those are things that are interesting. And then we have a control group. Now, being in a control group, people feel like they pulled the short straw. They really want to be in the exercise group. But when you're in the control group, after 6 months, we will let you come in and exercise. We won't do the whole 6-month program, but we'll give you some perks and some education, let you exercise and do some things. And those are things that are really important when you develop studies, that you don't want to leave people out. Like, you would never have a smoking cessation study and not offer nicotine replacement therapy to everybody. It's unethical. You don't want people to come in for something and give them nothing unless it hasn't been tested before, and then you really need a pure control arm. But for here, we have to look at this type of exercise. What we're doing now is putting together a follow-up study to called Stepping Stone, which focuses on breast cancer survivors, and looking at their change after they've been diagnosed with breast cancer and have completed their chemo and radiation treatment. We look to see if there's any improvement in their quality of life and even their biomarkers that could lead to an increased risk of their recurrence and hopefully not mortality. So we are extending these studies from along the whole continuum, from prevention to control, and we think that's really important. We've also conducted a study called the PEDLAR study. All the women undergoing radiation therapy for their breast cancer, for 6.5 weeks, every day they come in, they have to pedal at their seat for 15 minutes. We put little cycles down, and we found out the women that were randomized to the exercise intervention arm had an improved quality of life. So we're finding out, Georgetown never did exercise interventions until I came and brought my little team with them. And now I get emails saying, hey, we're writing a grant on exercise. Can we do this together and all? So they think that now their patients, these are clinicians, now, oh, my patient really needs to have some type of exercise intervention to reduce the fatigue. And you know, fatigue is a tricky subject, because when you have fatigue, you don't want to do anything. But if I can get you to do something, I can reduce your fatigue. It's a vicious cycle. If you're fatigued, you don't want to get out of bed. But if I can get you up and get you to do something one day, we can get you hooked to do it every day, at least for that study time, and see a really big improvement. Everybody who had cancer and did the exercise, their fatigue levels went down, their quality levels of life levels went up, and their physical functioning went up. And those are really important for cancer survivors, because you don't want to just be a survivor, you want to be a doer too, so you can survive and do things. So that's where we are now. We will finish recruiting by the end of April. That's our cutoff point, so that we have time to follow people for 6 months and conduct all the analyses to see. And one other study that we did along these lines was an exergaming study, the video games and the salsa and all that. We said, okay, you don't like traditional exercises? This is another grant that was funded by NIH. Let's see what it looks like. Do you do better or just as well with exergaming? So people like that. But then the community changed it on me. We want a combination. So that's what we're working on now, a combination where you can do structured, like you can do the treadmill one day a week, but we want to do the exergaming and the salsa. So our office is blasting with salsa music. It's not us working, it's the people coming in. But at least we have gotten people moving. And I think that's the most important thing. We always talked about moving forward. I just want people to take a step. And when they take a step, I think it really makes a big difference. So I think Just don't drink the Kool-Aid. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
If you have any questions, please just raise your hand or stand up.
I notice you don't use the term calories much in your presentation. I'm wondering, I've heard that there are different types of calories, and I'm just wondering what's the current thinking on that?
Well, two things. Are you asking me if I use the word I don't use the word calories in my presentation much because I really didn't want to focus on calories today and the nutrient intake, because that's another whole talk on even including the dietary guidelines. Nothing has changed. To be honest, nothing has changed. The caloric intake has remained the same. I don't use the word calories because I really didn't focus on nutrition today, but I haven't made any changes.
Hi, I'm curious, well, actually, first of all, just thanks for coming, I really appreciate it. But then my question is, I'm curious about the follow-up with people who go through these programs. Do you keep in touch with people who've gone through each level, whether it's a control or whether it's fully being involved for 6 months and see if it's a continuing lifestyle?
That's part of the research question, and it's the maintenance phase. Do people really maintain? So we have everybody sign a consent form that allows us to follow them through the study, and there's also a line for them to sign for us to follow them after the study ends to see if they maintain their weight or their physical activity levels and all. That's built into our study design. So for this study, we're following them 6 months post everything. But we only did a 6-month study, but we need to go to a 12-month study.
Right, because I think when you talk about community, I think that's fascinating because when you have this study, you're making a place for people to come together, and they all have that common ground of they're all doing the study, but then afterwards they might kind of lose that community because they don't have that space anymore. They might not know people who they can connect with.
And we also have that problem where people don't want anybody else in the room when they're exercising.
Yeah, like I'm definitely that way.
Oh, I don't know, 2 people. Okay.
I enjoyed your part of your presentation where you spoke to the power of having a team building to do effective research. I did not hear you mention health economists, and I'm wondering if those kinds of folks across the aisle in your B school at Georgetown or wherever, public policy, you're recruiting. And the reason I ask is because I'm always flummoxed because if 75% of what we spend healthcare dollars on is chronic disease related, which relates to behavioral change, not only behavioral change of the client on the treadmill here, or the
Yep.
sample on the treadmill, but the health payer, the insurance executive, the Medicare CMS executive out in Baltimore, the folks in the White House giving advice to the president's ear, et cetera. Those decisions about how we should shape what we pay for need to somehow be affected by what we know about where 75% of our money is being spent on the obesity and the other issues that are related to this large and growing syndrome you described. So that's why I asked you about health economists in your team.
On my team, I do not have health economists, but in the Cancer Center, I'm part of the Cancer Prevention and Control Group, like we all are. We have one of the leading in the country's health service research groups that works very closely with Public Policy Institute that you're talking about and the business school, and they do bring in health economists. And half of the research done at Georgetown by a group of people all have health economics as a part of it. So they are addressing it. They work with the economists all the time, but they are asking those questions, and those questions do drive policies. I'm just, at my juncture, focused on the behaviors, trying to change behaviors. But if you know a health economist wants to address that in this topic, volunteer, I'll take it. But that's important, but we do work with Ed Montgomery is the dean there at the Public Policy Institute, and they do work very closely with different pockets of people. And I just have a recent oral health disparities grant where I am working very closely with the Public Policy Institute because the funders want us to have a policy statement that we can make at the very end of everything. And doing that, we do work with health economists, but that's at the very beginning stages. But we do acknowledge that that's very important.
Hi, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I would invite you to perhaps share anything you think that we might have wrong now, or anything you think that we might, that there might be emerging conflicting data on. So there was and I've come from the School of Public Health at Chapel Hill, but there was, it seems just, for example, like coconut oil was on the bad side, but medium chain triglycerides are what our brains are made of, so maybe it's not so bad. So do you think, this is a personal question, and I don't know if you can actually answer it, if you feel comfortable answering it, but
Who's your dean? Who was your dean at Chapel Hill? Let me see. I'm just questioning.
it was I was there in the 90s.
Yeah, okay. All right. No, I know this group, I think. Well, go ahead.
I mean, I was in environmental sciences and engineering.
No,
so-
okay.
But, and I don't actually know which group you're talking about. But
School of
I
Public
think
Health.
it's interesting. Definitely don't drink the Kool-Aid, but it seems kind of overwhelming that all kinds of carbohydrates, especially refined carbohydrates that we don't consider sugar, are driving so much, that's going on. And, but still, it's not showing up in the official federal guidelines.
All right. So you probably have read the Dietary Guidelines report that just came out in 2015, or I was on that committee. Let me just tell you a little bit about conflicts. We thought it was an honor to be invited by Secretary Sebelius and the Secretary of USDA to serve on this committee.
I'm sorry, my phone is ringing and I thought I silenced it.
So this Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, we thought it was a great thing to be invited. There was like, I think 13 or 14 of us invited to be on this committee. The worst experience in my life, probably. First of all, we were told it was going to be 7 meetings over 18 months. That was true. They didn't tell us we had to do work every day of the week, 2 phone calls, conference calls every week for the 18 months, and that we had to write chapters and chapters and chapters for that final document. And that when we vote the document, that the government would then sanitize it to what comes out. So your point about conflict is really very dear to my heart because I'm just recovering from that event. And I can tell you that everything you're saying about the refined, they don't show up. And if you haven't published on it and put it out there in a way that we can even include it in our thinking, it doesn't get in the literature. It doesn't make it to the final report, doesn't make it to the final recommendations. It has no chance in hell of getting to the policy side. Those are problems. When you think about the approach that is used, you have to have systematic reviews incorporated. So if you didn't write about a certain topic or didn't get enough papers written about it or people didn't think that they liked all these avenues, it didn't get included. So we're going to always have conflict until we can resolve that. Now, I would never be on 2020 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee because I don't know if we really made a difference from 2010. We try to talk about patterns and work sites and things of that sort, and that's what we were asked to do. Well, I don't think I think those chapters got deleted. So some of the comments that you're making about the refined carbohydrates and all, we addressed it. Everything doesn't come out what we say. So I've learned the political side is no matter what the science says, and we had to argue this down, we have to go by a certain set of rules, but we had to fight, and in the end, we lose. We have had so many nasty emails sent to us. I'm glad they go to the chairman. Then she sends it to all of us to share the wealth, But we have had so much hate sent because we don't say the right things, but nobody really understands that we don't make the final report. When the final report came out, we had never seen that report. So we saw it when the newspaper saw it. I didn't take any phone calls. So the things that you think are right, go with your gut, because I tell you, the things that we thought were right got wiped out. That's the policy side. That's I will never do it again. That's all I can say.
So you mentioned with your current study how it's unique because the participants are African American women.
Say it again.
Oh, I'm sorry. With your current study, it's unique because the participants are African American women. And I know that the trend for studies is to study white men. And I was just wondering if there's any kind of deficit in our knowledge base relative to metabolic syndrome or cancer that really speaks out to you because of a lack of studies of diverse populations?
I used to, probably 20 years ago, give a talk on men and mice, because that's what we knew the most about in general. I think knowing that we have gender differences clearly are there. People will argue that we don't need to focus on ethnic minorities so much, but I'll give an example. I've been involved in seeing studies done where you have white participants, black participants, or Native American. White participants might come in and have one disease. I have breast cancer. I don't have anything else. Somebody else will come in and say, another black woman might come in and say, I have breast cancer. I've had hypertension, had a stroke, had diabetes. I'm gonna treat you for the breast cancer. Yay. I'm gonna treat you for, no, I can't treat you for the breast cancer the same way. I'll reduce your dosage because you have all these comorbidities that may interfere and cause some detriment. But we both have cancer, but you look different. We don't know enough. Even the fact that clinical trials, many people are not on clinical trials. Only 5% of all adult population is on clinical trials, whereas kids around 60 to 80%. Why? Because the kids don't pick, the parents pick. But the adults only 5%. But we always are underrepresented in minorities and because of cutoff points, or inclusion criteria, or exclusion criteria. People get excluded. So we don't know how certain drugs, I think, really work in the real world. The real world would be this person has these diseases. So you can't put them officially on a national clinical trial, but I do think we need to do more work in terms of documenting what happens when people take the drugs anyhow. Unfortunately, when you're on a clinical trial, you get better care, you get seen more often, things of that sort, and they document, did you sneeze too hard? If you're not on a clinical trial, you're here, check, So we need to document that column so that we can see if we really are underdosing people. Why is the mortality rate so high in ethnic minorities, particularly black women, black men? Why is the mortality rate so high? We had the same disease, but now the incidence rate for breast cancer between blacks and whites, there's no disparity. There's no gap now. Well, they're still dying at a higher rate. So we got to keep figuring out how to do it. So until we really address other populations, how can we say what we know about them? Or if we don't address women, we used to, I don't know, you might remember Mr. Fit. The studies were always about the men. But now times have changed, the Women's Health Initiative. We have the Black Women's Health Study. We have a lot of studies now on women. But now we're not doing much on men. So it's a vicious cycle, so times are changing. So with metabolic syndrome, we know ethnic minorities have a higher rate. Doesn't mean they're exclusively the holder in charge of metabolic syndrome, but that's clearly there. That's what another,
So I know that you said that your focus was on the biomedical, but in the FIERCE intervention, do you talk about at all, or in your findings, are you going to talk a lot about the racial and the gender differences in those studies and why those might affect the health outcomes?
Well, we are only studying black women, and we're not comparing to whites because I don't think that's the appropriate reference point. But we do look at biomarkers. So we've collected blood from everybody. We have tons of blood, probably. That's their feeling. We have tons of blood. We collect at different points in time. So baseline, mid-level point, follow-up. We collect blood samples. So we look at some information markers. We'll be able to look at some of the biological basis being information markers, whether we look at the lipid profiles or we look at what else are we looking at? Name it. We actually collecting some DNA as well to look at some genes to see if there's going to be some differences somewhere. So we will look at the biology through these biomarkers that we are collecting to see how exercise impacts the biomarkers in these
settings.
We don't know. We can also do some very quick studies and look as well. But yeah, we will look at that.
And then just to follow up, do you ever have any sociologists on your
Do I have sociologists? We work with sociologists at the university. Are you a sociologist? What a wild guess. Yes, and because the interesting thing about sociology and the interesting thing about the way the science is going now, the science is now going to multi-level interventions, which means I'm focusing on the individual, but the grant that we're working on now, has to go beyond the individual. It has to show at least 2 or 3 levels. So the individual, it could be the provider, it could be the family, and sociology works very well when you talk about family studies. So that's really important in this new era of how the studies are being crafted and requested to focus on multi-level. So sociologists, I think, have a good, they can really provide a lot of information and be part of the team science, because when you start doing families, I don't deal in families. I think it's tough dealing with one person, but now you have to get the families involved, assess that, and does the impact of, like, a good nutrition study. My thing is, in many families, whoever cooks is going to influence the rest of the family. We think so, especially if they're children and all their influence. So do we look at the family from the perspective of the child, the family from the perspective of the cook, the chef, whatever, and we have to look at the changes. So some people don't have that intact family, and everybody defines family. I know from sociology, every family doesn't look the same. It can be, one parent, one grandparent, it could be anything. So I think sociology has a major role in this.
Okay, well, we're going to have to stop because I know many of you have to go to class. But again, you're welcome to come over to the office suite at 1:15, give us a few minutes, and talk informally, one-on-one, in small groups. I think it would be great if we could do that, and thank you very, very much for coming.